Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Smith. This now fortunate enough to have double duty today to moderate another panel. I lead our brands team over at TeamSnap. And curious, anyone in the room happen to be a TeamSnap parent? Raise your hand. I see one in the back. Awesome. So quick little plug, TeamSnap is the #1 most downloaded and used youth sports management app in the App Store. So if you have a kid who plays youth sports, it's frankly the way to keep your life organized. And I'm really, really excited that Stacey and I are getting to chat here. Stacey's got a lot of awesome things to not only update this group on in regards to what you're up to, but frankly give some background on what's happening at a pretty legendary brand. So Stacey, to kick things off, would love for you to talk a little bit about your role at Evian and give the audience a little insight to what you're up to.
Yeah, for sure. Is this thing is on, right? Yeah, so I'm Stacey Warren. I'm the senior brand manager at Evian for the US part of the business. Evian is part of Danone, which is of course a global company. Evian is a global brand headquartered in Paris, but we have different brand teams at each of the different markets and regions. So in the US market, I'm on the team there, responsible for pretty much every part of the brand, from product development to, how we communicate with our consumers, partnerships, of course, big deal as well, innovation, and then even commercial distribution, trade, all of that. So we really touch every part of it and how Evian shows up here in the US. So partnerships in particular are a huge part of what we do. Again, because Evian is a global brand, we have really started to, we've really been known for quite a long time for being a really iconic premium water. That's what we stand for when we think about how we are to consumers and what people really know us for. We were actually the very first premium water in the US, coming straight from France. It really does come from the Alps and then travels here. Back in the 70s, we started here in the US and really again started that premium segment where a lot of the brands that we see today playing in premium waters are leaning heavily on partnerships and those kind of celebrity associations, and it's become a lot more about luxury and lifestyle as opposed to just the commodity, of water, as a way to kind of differentiate yourself from the water that you could just be drinking out of your tap. So partnerships for Evian are huge. They always have been. Our focus in recent years has really been how do we cement ourselves as that more premium luxury brand that drives culture, really wants to resonate with our consumers, especially as the kind of world is changing and every brand is trying to find those different ways to resonate. So partnerships and leaning into cultural activation moments have really been a big piece of that, especially over the last few years.
Let's expand upon that a little bit. So I mentioned partnerships being a really big part of the strategy for Evian specifically. Can you talk a little bit about what the evaluation process looks like and what the strategy is when you're looking at a high level, what the right partner is for Evian?
Yeah, of course. So it obviously, I think looking at the framework, right, you have to think about the objectives for what you're trying to accomplish for your brand. And for Evian, that's certainly, again, continuing to cement ourselves within culture, making sure that we are, part of the conversation and really helping move conversations forward as opposed to just inserting ourselves in places where it doesn't feel quite authentic. And then there's the whole consumer side to things as well, right? How do we, show up in the places where consumers would expect a premium luxury brand to show up? We kind of, I think it's true, and we say a lot that if you say you're cool, you're not cool. And so you have to, communicate that you're cool in other ways. So for that, that's thinking about, who our target consumer is, what are the types of things that they're doing. For Evian specifically, that's a more affluent individual, enjoys like a premium lifestyle. We call them an active engager. So they're always traveling, jet setting. They enjoy premium experiences and they want that from a water as well. It's kind of like their badge status, symbol in that way. So where are the places that they would be showing up? If they're showing up somewhere, Evian should show up there too. And that's how, with the association, that's how at least we think we create that and maintain that kind of iconic status that we're really known for. The other side of that as well is it's not only showing up in the right places, but it's showing up in the right ways. So for us, what that means for Evian is to lean really heavily into what makes our brand different. And again, like when you look at the shelf of water, you might be thinking to yourself, like, how are these brands actually different from each other? And again, I think similar to what a lot of more luxury premium brands do, what we try to do is fall back on, our personality, our values, how we show up, and use that to kind of complement the other more like product, proof points or reasons to believe, because it all, again, contributes to this image at the end of the day and perception. For Evian, what differentiates us is our kind of effortless joy, we call it. We always have this this feeling of joy. Our campaign creative idea and platform that is central to our brand right now is called Live Young. It harkens back to when our iconic babies campaign launched. If people are familiar with that from several years ago now, but all about kind of finding this like intrinsic joy within yourself and using that as the manifestation of what your own kind of modern wellness is, being your best self, and obviously using hydration to get you there. So I would say those are kind of the things we think about in terms of a partner. How is it aligning with where the consumer is and what the consumer expects from us, and then obviously how does Evian play authentically there as well.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this prior to this discussion, and what I find really interesting is that you work for a global brand, and what you're talking about in regards to the brand showing up authentically could mean something totally different in France versus what it might look like here in the US. Leading the US team, can you talk a little bit about how you might distill down what might be a larger scale partnership on a global front to making it relevant and authentic to the Evian brand here in the US?
Yeah, that's basically the essence of what we do every single day. Fun fact, Evian in premium water is actually quite unique in the US and in other countries or regions across the world. In Europe, for example, and as a contrast, there's no such thing as premium water. So no one would ever walk into a grocery store and expect to pay, the equivalent of $5 or $6 for water. It's just not a consumer behavior. So when you think about Evian as a global brand, that's really where the kind of biggest complexity lies in how is there kind of one global strategy, but then that is distilled down to make sense for markets and consumers in different areas, to your point. So for us, we try to take, again, those high level qualities of Evian and the things that Evian stands for, and make them relevant here, because that's our objective, right? To grow our business and make sure our brand is positioned in the best way possible for this market. One example of that is our connection with tennis. So Evian has a long-standing history with premium sports, a big legacy with tennis in particular. We sponsor Wimbledon with our UK team, and we've been a sponsor of the US Open. This is our 38th year, actually. And so the overall idea and reason to kind of have tennis as one of these tentpoles within the broader strategy is because it aligns with that premium consumer I was talking about beforehand, who really is the same across all of the world. But how they experience brands or want to experience brands could show up, differently depending on what market. So yes, tennis at a certain level, because it's premium, it's a bit more elevated. It's got a certain, a certain feel to it. And then we say, okay, New York City is one of our biggest priority markets when we think about our business here in the country. What's the kind of marquee event? Obviously, with tennis, it's the US Open, and the electric atmosphere of the US Open, everything that it stands for, we feel really does perfectly align with Evian, and how we want to show up here. Premium, definitely the experience. I think, as we all probably know, if you're in New York, this is just what you do when these 2 weeks happen, over Labor Day every year. So it's really about, again, how do we understand what we're doing at a global level to make sure that the brand stands for the same things and can be famous for the same things across the world, but really becomes super relevant here where we care about it most.
Got it. And talking about a partnership and why tennis makes so much sense is a really good segue into what is very exciting with some very, very current news that has come out with Evian's new partnership with Pharrell. Super, super exciting. You want to give the audience a little overview on exactly what's going on with that? And we'd love to hear a little bit behind the why of why that happened as well.
Yeah, for sure. So that is a perfect example of, again, one of these global partnerships that we then adapt to the US market and our consumer. Every year at a global level, Evian has a partnership with a creative designer. Usually it's a French fashion house, honestly, to kind of make that connection with French brand, French fashion house. And we do some sort of activation with them throughout the year. This year, because of Pharrell's connection with Louis Vuitton, he's the creative director of Louis Vuitton Men right now. And he was actually extremely close to Virgil Abloh, who was also a designer who had the same type of creative role, very close to him, and wanted to work with Evian and kind of continue in the footsteps, which is a really beautiful thing. So that is an example of a global partnership that then we say, okay, well, Pharrell is obviously a multi-hyphenate, he's an A++++ celebrity. He's relevant all over the world, but obviously where he's driving the most conversation is in the United States. And so as the US market, we want to be able to capitalize on that. So what just dropped last week actually is a new partnership between him and his brand Human Race, which is they're a wellness company in the US, where we created this tennis-inspired limited edition capsule collection with them, bringing together the two brands right before the US Open, and kind of, again, capitalizing on this moment where Evian always shows up in different ways, because the US Open is our biggest kind of marketing tentpole activity of the year. But we had the opportunity at this, amazing global partnership to bring that home. So how could we combine the two basically to make a really big splash and do something totally unexpected? And I think that people honestly wouldn't think that Evian would do, create clothes with, a streetwear brand and like a streetwear touch, especially with what Evian is known for. So that's kind of how it came together. The collection dropped last week. We're actually doing a launch event in the city this Friday in Gansevoort Plaza, and then we'll have a consumer day on Saturday that everyone should come by and look at the collection and experience kind of the joyful wellness vibes that make up what this partnership actually is, which kind of goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of when you're thinking about these different partnerships and how they really can come together and make both of your brands successful, keeping to the things that are true to you. So joyful wellness is kind of the overarching concept of this.
Totally, and it's such a smart strategy, leveraging sports and taking advantage of this pinnacle event that's taking place in New York with a launch like this. But can you talk a little bit about communication and brand trust? And that goes, frankly, on both sides. You mentioned, no one would expect Evian to be getting into clothing. And Pharrell and Human Race, typically hasn't really delved too deep into the sports field. It's been much more lifestyle focused. Can you talk a little bit about, what were both sides willing to do in order to make sure this was the right fit for both sides of the relationship?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think communication has been probably the cornerstone of this entire partnership, and that trust, to your point. The two brands are quite far away, but also connected in a lot of the kind of higher level ways that we've been describing. And so I think this is actually one of the things that I found that makes partnerships so successful is when you can have that communication and trust between the two brands, but then also almost within yourself and your brand to know what are the things that you can actually flex on and kind of stretch your brand to go into different areas where you wouldn't necessarily have been able to do that if you weren't partnering with, maybe an unexpected partner. So I would say on both of our sides, Evian and Human Race, it's been extremely crucial that we, come to this with an open mind, I would say, and being aligned on what the common objective is between the two of us, right? It's making sure that we are focusing on what we want the consumer to get out of this, the feelings that we want to create, the engagement that we want to have, and using those as kind of the guiding principles throughout. And so every time, we're deciding on a certain element of the activation, whether it's the design of the mock neck, in the collection, or how the graphic treatment is going to look when we are conceptualizing our paid media assets, everything goes back to, okay, well, what are the kind of overarching principles of this joyful wellness? Human Race is all about being integrated into the community and making sure people feel included. Well-being for all is what they stand for, which of course Evian, wants to play there as well. So how do we make sure that we always are keeping that at the forefront? And then at least what we have found is when you hit maybe those milestones throughout the partnership or crucial decisions have to be made, if you both come together with that in mind, it's a lot easier to come to something that actually is better than what it would have been if it were just your brand or just their brand doing it together, doing it on their own, which is the whole point of doing it together.
Got it. So, it's amazing in regards to what you were talking about with communication being so strong and that leading to what is seemingly a really, really strong reception and message that's coming at launch time. I'm also assuming things might not have been totally clean on every single ask that might have been coming from each side. Can you talk a little bit, whether it's even this example with Pharrell and Human Race or a different partner you've worked with, where there was a challenge that came up during the process of getting something either launched or put into play, and how you and the team might have overcome something like that?
For sure. I think, again, the two brands, Evian and Human Race, are definitely a bit different. Evian, of course, as part of this bigger global CPG company, right? Human Race is a lot smaller. They, but they play again more in that community, like inclusion, kind of driving culture area, which is of course why we would want to partner with them in general. And so I think just the way, when you think about that, a smaller brand and a bigger brand, the way that those two would approach, or answer the same question, in some cases is completely different. A very sort of tactical example maybe is on the subject of branding. With a corporate, or more corporate CPG brand, like usually when we do events, we have our logos all over the place, right? Like we live and die by the logo, because with a bottled water, for example, like when you see Evian on the shelf, like your consumer has 0.2 seconds or something of decision making at the shelf, and that's all the chance you get to really capture them. Your logo has to work a lot for you in those cases. So it's natural, I think, that we then try to say, okay, well, if we do another sort of experiential activation, or if we do, I don't know, a paid media, like we need our logo everywhere, because that's how people remember us or will recognize us in this situation. In this very specific example, Human Race is completely the opposite when it comes to their branding. They're super minimal. They're much more like in that quiet luxury type of feel, which also has a point, and that's what works, and that's kind of what if you look at that, like where they play, it makes sense. But that was something where, again, it's the exact same question, and two brands, because of their perspectives and the different markets that they fit into and their own experiences, they come at it with two completely different answers. So that's where kind of what I was saying beforehand, of in those moments you really have to remember, like, okay, what is the overall goal of this partnership? What are the things that I absolutely need from my brand to be there to make that happen? And what are the things that maybe I can let go a little bit of? And maybe it just might still be okay, Like maybe we can have the logo in two places, for example, like when we're building out this experiential activation in Gansport Plaza for this weekend, maybe we'll have the logo in two places as opposed to 10, and like, will it still be okay? It probably will still be okay. So those are some of the things where, important to have that trust and communication, and again, always coming back to like the overall objectives that we both want to get out of the partnership.
Got it. So we talked a little bit over the past few minutes about getting something successfully to launch. Let's talk about something that has been successful post-launch, and we'd love to hear a little bit about a successful campaign that you and the team have run, and frankly, what led to the success there.
Yeah, it obviously dovetails into everything we've been speaking about already, but the US Open, I think for us, is a great example of a kind of successful activation that we run every single year, successful partnership. I think just first the longevity of the partnership kind of can tell you how successful it's been. You don't stay a partner of something for 38 years without it being successful. So that I think has been maybe our most successful, US specific partnership to date. Really in recent years, we've been trying to lean into taking the connection with them and really leveraging it, what we call outside of the ground. So really making sure we reach more consumers than, the ones who just show up in New York for it, even though that's a lot too. But we know, and this is why we continue to partner, that the association between our two brands is a strong purchase driver with potential evian consumers. So in the past couple of years, we've really been, again, focusing on how do we take the fact that we are the official water of the US Open, and how do we really like maximize it and get the most out of it that we possibly can. We want to leverage it in paid media that we run around the summer timeframe, which also just happens to coincide great with the fact that summer is peak season for buying water because it's so hot outside. So using the US Open kind of official water designation there. We have been showing up in store as well with some of our kind of retail point of sale and tools, running consumer promotions to make sure that, again, when you're capturing people in that mindset of wanting to buy water, they're seeing the connection, and they're seeing the connection with the US Open, and that's driving the consideration and ultimately conversion to get them to put it in their cart. We've just done a lot also in terms of New York City-based media as well, just like a lot of the other brands who partner with the tournament. Obviously, you see every single subway station on the 7 is like plastered in US Open creative around this time anyway, so really trying to lean into that to make sure that, yes, we sell water. We're the only water that you can buy on the grounds of the US Open, but we also want you to see that we have the partnership outside. Last year, too, we ended up doing a really big kind of PR activation moment as well. And for the same reasons as I was talking about earlier about really wanting to kind of have Evian drive more conversation and getting us more involved in these earned kind of cultural moments. We took over a Circle Line cruise last year called the SS Evian, and had like an official like men's finals viewing experience, and basically brought people together with Maria Sharapova, who's a longtime Evian tennis ambassador up until last year. And so you kind of use that again as like a point to capitalize on this electric atmosphere that the tournament brings, and really again make sure that we're cementing the partnership in the best way we could. And we actually have seen a lot of great results from that. We saw actually in the New York region, when we were doing all of this in store and point of sale and things like that, we saw our share go up in grocery and in convenience stores in the quarter following the activity. We know for a fact that, again, leaning into these cultural moments and the US Open being part of that helps maintain that like iconic status that consumers know us for, and actually helps increase affinity and emotional connection with our consumers from brand health tracking data. So all of these things are kind of helping contribute, I would say, to the overall success of the partnership. And that's why this year, if anyone is planning to go to the US Open or just be around the city, obviously, during the time. You'll see we're going even bigger and better. We have a ton of paid media happening now. We actually wrapped a 7-line subway car for the first time, or subway train. There's like 6 cars on the subway train for the first time. A lot of, again, paid media in store. We've kind of totally revamped how we show up on the grounds as well, with a new look and feel, with the sales carts that show up there. So again, everything kind of contributing to the overall like look and feel that we want people to take away from the partnership.
Got it. So I think we have time for a couple more questions. First, and I think this is a pretty good segue into the question I'm going to ask. You're talking a little bit about some of the unique things Evian's been doing when it comes to partnerships. Where do you see, if any, trends for the future kind of coming right now in the partnership space, and if possible, specifically within the sports marketing space?
Yeah, I love actually the fact that we've been seeing so many like high end and lower end, not low end, but lower end brands kind of coming together. I think that speaks to kind of what we were saying earlier about the whole point, when you think about it, of doing these types of partnerships, is if you can't stretch yourself, you can only stretch yourself if you're working with a brand, for example, that no one would really ever expect you to work with. So I know this is a couple years old now, but I love the Jacques Mus and Nike collaborations that have been happening, and the fact that, again, a relatively higher end brand coming with a sports brand that's like totally in a different, obviously standing for something totally different, and coming together is a truly unique collaboration. And I think too, we've just been seeing a lot of brands take their partnerships to maybe amplify them in different ways. I think, we just heard, but I love the New Balance and Coco Gauff partnership. And obviously that was a great moment last year when she won, and the way the brand, again, looking third-party observer, but looking from the outside on how, they were able to really capitalize on that with her, with the Call Me Champion shirts right afterwards. And obviously everything that she's done for them, show up how she has after winning is just been really inspiring, honestly. So looking forward to kind of seeing more of that too in the future.
Awesome. So as a takeaway for the audience, if they were to leave here with one piece of advice, whether it's something you've received or something you'd impart on the audience, what would you give them in regards to what sports should play in regards to a role in a brand's overall marketing strategy?
I think sports, honestly, for us have been a really wonderful way to connect with consumers. And it's a way to tap into something that people have so much affinity for. And really, when people are fans of something, they follow either the sport or the person or the athlete or, the league or whatever. And partnering with sports, again, as it aligns with your brand, can really be the best way to tap into that. And I think it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning too, of like you don't want to tell people what you are. You want them to feel and perceive what you are, and a lot of that is by showing up in the places where they would expect you to. So, or where putting yourself into the places where they are, so that they start to understand you there. So again, like what we do with tennis, and if sports is a way to connect with your consumer, start showing up there, focus on an athlete, focus on a tournament, a league, the best way that aligns with your brand too, because that's where it's going to be the most authentic, and consumers can obviously tell when things are authentic versus not. So definitely.
Yeah, love that piece of advice of making them feel it and see it versus being told it. So Stacey, thank you so much. This was great. Any questions from the audience?
What has been one of your favorite and most meaningful partnerships that you've worked on at Evian?
Yeah, honestly, it's been this Pharrell and Human Race one. Again, just we wouldn't have been able to do that on a lot of other brands within Danone, just because of where Evian plays in this more luxury premium space. The fact that we even could have those conversations with someone like Pharrell and get him to, want to work with us has truly been inspiring. He himself is a total visionary, and completely, exactly kind of what he's billed as, super creative, but very, very humble at the same time. And so being in his presence and, just being able to meet him and understand, how he also saw our partnership and collaboration, was really inspiring. And we've had great results so far, honestly, press results from the collection so far. So yeah, I think it will be really fruitful for all of us involved.
Awesome. Well, Stacey, thank you so much. This was great. Super, super excited to see more around the launch of the Evian for All partnership.